Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going all the way to East Africa to explore Ethiopia.
Fascinating choice.
We've got a ton of different sources to dig through, historical accounts, geographical data, even some economic analyses and cultural insights. So
Sounds like we're in for quite a journey.
you're telling me,
Yeah.
buckle up because it's going to be a wild ride. One thing that really surprised me going into this,
Yeah, what's that?
well, did you know that Ethiopia is one of the oldest Christian nations in the world?
Oh, absolutely. And not just that, it's also one of the few African nations to successfully resist European colonization. I mean, come on, they beat the Italians in the Battle of Adwa.
Yeah, that's right. They held on to their sovereignty. It's incredible. But let's rewind a little bit, way back to ancient Ethiopia and the Kingdom of Aksum.
Aksum, a real powerhouse back in the day. They controlled major trade routes, connecting the Roman Empire all the way to India.
Talk about a global hub. I mean, they were trading everything. Ivory, gold, spices, textiles, you name it.
Exactly. And they were incredibly wealthy because of it. Plus, there's even a connection to the Queen of Sheba, though.
And I was just about to ask about that. Is there really a link or is that just a legend?
Well, let's just say there are definitely some theories floating around out there. Adds a bit of mystery to the whole thing, don't you think?
For sure. But speaking of mystery, what about Aksum's role in the early spread of Christianity?
Yes. That's a pivotal moment in their history. Aksum embraced Christianity early on, and it's remained a central part of Ethiopian culture ever since.
It's amazing how they managed to maintain their independence for so long, especially during that period when European powers were colonizing left and right all across Africa.
Well, their geography definitely played a role. Ethiopia's mountainous terrain made it pretty tough for invaders to conquer.
Right, it was a natural fortress, but I think it's more than just geography, wasn't it?
Oh, for sure. Ethiopia's fierce independence, their strong sense of national identity, all fueled by a long and rich history and unique culture.
That's a great point. And speaking of geography, Ethiopia really is a land of contrast, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. From the soaring peaks of the Ethiopian highlands, we're talking over 4,000 meters, to the scorching depths of the Danakil Depression.
It's like stepping into another world, right? I mean, the Danakil Depression is home to Dalal, which is said to be the hottest inhabited place on Earth.
Scorching. It's a true testament to the extremes you find in Ethiopia.
And that incredible biodiversity, right? They've got everything from lush rainforests to arid deserts. I read about those gelada baboons, you know, the ones with the bright red chests.
Oh, yeah. Fascinating creatures. And they're the only primates that primarily graze on grass. Talk about unique.
It's mind-blowing. But as we move into the 20th century, things get a little more, well, complicated.
You could say that again. Ethiopia faced some real challenges, from internal struggles to shifts in the global landscape.
So we have Emperor Haile Selassie, a figure associated with modernization, but also a fair bit of controversy, right?
Right. He modernized Ethiopia in a lot of ways, but his reign was definitely marked by authoritarianism. And then, of course, we have the Derg regime, a period of intense political upheaval and, sadly, a lot of violence.
The Derg was a communist military junta. Their policies, like the Red Terror, resulted in a lot of suffering and had a lasting impact on the country.
Absolutely. A very dark chapter in Ethiopia's history.
So that brings us to the present day. Where does that leave Ethiopia now?
That's a great question, and one we'll dig into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore Ethiopia's current political landscape, its economic challenges and opportunities, and what the future might hold for this fascinating and resilient nation. You know, exploring Ethiopia's past, like all that history and geography we talked about, it really sets the stage for understanding their culture.
It's got to be pretty unique, right? Given how much they resisted outside influence.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a cultural heritage that's incredibly vibrant and diverse.
So where do we even start?
Well, think about this. Ethiopia is home to over 80 distinct ethnic groups, each one with its own languages, traditions, customs.
Wow, over 80. That's mind-blowing. Are there any that really stand out?
Well, the Oromo, the Amhara, the Somali, and the Tigrayans are the four largest. They've had a huge impact on the country, shaping its history, politics, and culture in so many ways.
But it's the mix of all of them, right, that makes Ethiopia so special.
Exactly. It's like a giant cultural mosaic. And despite all those differences, there are some common threads that run through it all.
Like what?
Well, there's a strong emphasis on community and shared values. Things like hospitality, a deep respect for elders, and a reverence for tradition. You'll find that pretty much everywhere you go in Ethiopia.
I love that. It speaks to a real sense of unity, even in the midst of such incredible diversity.
Yeah.
What about language? With so many different groups, how do they communicate?
It's a multilingual society, that's for sure. Amharic is the official language, but you'll hear tons of others too, like Oromo, Somali, Tigrinya. People just switch back and forth depending on who they're talking to. It's pretty amazing, actually.
It's like everyone's bilingual or even trilingual. So we've got all these different groups with their own customs and languages, but is there anything that visually represents Ethiopian culture? Like, what about their art and architecture?
Oh, they've got a rich artistic tradition, that's for sure, particularly when it comes to religious art. Think illuminated manuscripts, those beautifully detailed icons, ornately carved crosses.
I've seen pictures of those crosses. They're so intricate and unique.
They often feature patterns and designs that blend Christian and pre-Christian symbolism, a real testament to the layers of history in Ethiopia.
And their architecture is equally impressive. Those rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, for example.
Ah, yes. Churches literally carved out of solid rock. It's like something out of an Indiana Jones movie. Definitely a must-see if you ever visit Ethiopia.
Okay, we've covered art and architecture, but what about the music? What makes Ethiopian music stand out?
Well, prepare yourself for some unique sounds. One of the things that sets it apart is its use of a pentatonic scale, which means it's based on 5 notes instead of the 7 we're used to in Western music.
So how does that affect the sound?
It creates a more spacious feel with wider intervals between the notes. It can sound haunting and incredibly beautiful at the same time.
Haunting? Oh, I'm intrigued. And what about instruments? Anything unique?
Oh, for sure. You'll hear instruments like the krar, a type of lyre, and the masenko, a one-stringed bowed lute that has this incredibly moving sound. And of course, no Ethiopian celebration is complete without the rhythm of the drums.
So we've got unique melodies, cool instruments. What about the lyrics themselves? What are some common themes?
You'll hear a lot about love, longing, patriotism, and a deep connection to the land. And there's this really fascinating genre called tizita, which is all about nostalgia and longing for the past.
Nostalgia. Now that's something we could all relate to no matter where we're from.
It's a universal human emotion. And it's amazing how music can connect us to those shared experiences. But hey, we can't talk about Ethiopian culture without mentioning the food.
Oh yes, Ethiopian food is incredible. I love how it's all about sharing and that communal dining experience, and the flavors are just out of this world.
You've got bold flavors, vibrant colors, and this tradition of sharing large platters of food instead of individual plates. It's very social and engaging.
Right, and who can forget the injera, that spongy flatbread used to scoop up the food? It's so unique.
Injera is made from teff, an ancient grain native to the region. It has this slightly sour flavor that goes perfectly with the rich stews and vegetable dishes.
Speaking of which, what are some of the must-try dishes for a newbie like me?
Oh, you can't go wrong with dorawat, a flavorful chicken stew simmered in spices. Or sherawat, a hearty chickpea stew. And if you're feeling adventurous, try kitfo, which is minced raw beef seasoned with a spicy blend called mitmita.
Raw beef. Wow, that's pretty adventurous. Maybe one day. But I love how each dish seems to tell a story about Ethiopia's history and culture.
Absolutely. And don't forget about gursha. It's this tradition where you feed each other with your hands as a gesture of love and respect. It really embodies that communal spirit.
It's amazing how food can bring people together. So we've explored the diversity of ethnic groups, the unique art, the captivating music, the delicious cuisine. But what about the future? How is Ethiopian culture evolving with all the changes happening in the world?
That's a great question. It's a delicate balance between preserving tradition and embracing the future. And that's something we'll dive into in the next part of our exploration.
It's amazing to think about how Ethiopia is balancing holding on to its traditions while moving into the future.
It's a tough act for any country, let alone one with such a rich and layered history. But they seem to be doing a pretty remarkable job of it, finding ways to bridge that gap between the old and the new.
So it's less about choosing one or the other and more about finding ways to make them work together. Do you have any examples of what that actually looks like on the ground?
Oh, absolutely. Take the music scene, for example. You've got these young, up-and-coming Ethiopian musicians who are blending traditional instruments and melodies with modern genres. Like you'll hear traditional sounds mixed with hip-hop beats or electronic music.
Wow, that's really cool. It sounds like they're finding ways to express their Ethiopian identity in a way that's both modern and global. Are there other places we see that happening, this kind of fusion of old and new?
Totally. You see it in fashion, too. Young designers are incorporating traditional fabrics and patterns into their designs, giving them a contemporary twist. And in the visual arts, there are artists using traditional techniques like weaving and embroidery to create pieces that are both modern and thought-provoking.
It's like they're taking the best of both worlds and creating something entirely new. It must be inspiring for young Ethiopians to see their culture represented in such a dynamic way.
Oh, I think it definitely gives them a sense of pride, a feeling of ownership over their heritage. And with social media and the internet, these artists have this incredible platform to reach a global audience. They can connect with people from all over the world and show them the richness and beauty of Ethiopian culture.
That's powerful. But with all this change happening, are there any concerns about losing some of those traditions along the way? Like, could modernization and globalization lead to a decline in some of those traditional practices?
Yeah, it's a valid concern, and I know it's something that a lot of Ethiopians are talking about and debating. There's this worry about the potential loss of certain traditions, maybe even some languages, and even the way society is structured. But I also think there's a growing awareness of the importance of preserving their cultural heritage.
It sounds like there's no easy answer. So how is the Ethiopian government approaching this? Are they doing anything to protect and promote their culture?
Definitely. There are museums and cultural centers specifically focused on preserving traditional arts, crafts, music, you name it. They're also working on documenting and archiving different cultural practices so they aren't lost to future generations.
It's good to hear that they're taking steps to safeguard their cultural heritage. It really highlights how important it is for a country's identity and future.
Absolutely. It's not just about looking back, it's about using the past as a foundation to build a future that's modern, vibrant, and uniquely Ethiopian.
Well said. What a journey this has been. We've gone from ancient empires to modern-day cultural evolution. I feel like I've learned so much about Ethiopia, about its complexity and its resilience.
It's a place that truly defies easy categorization. It challenges our assumptions about history, culture, and what shapes our world.
Any final thoughts for our listeners who are feeling inspired to learn more?
I'd say dive in, explore the aspects of Ethiopian culture that spoke to you, try the food, listen to the music, maybe even plan a trip to experience it firsthand. There's a whole world of discovery waiting for you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Ethiopia. It's been a real eye-opener, and I hope our listeners feel the same. See you next time.
My pleasure. Keep exploring and keep those aha moments coming.